Sushruta for NEET is now available on the Google Play Store. Try it out for free.
Hi, my dear students. Hearty welcome to Jnanamarga.in biology classes. I am Professor G.K. Bhatt. In the last class, we have started studying about this neural control and coordination. We have seen the different types of the neurons and the difference between that of the unipolar, bipolar, multipolar neurons. And we also studied about the conduction of nerve impulses. All these we have studied in the last class. Now let us continue with the central nervous system. The brain is the central information processing organ of our body and acts as the command and control system. As you are aware, thousands of metabolic activities happen in our body simultaneously, and all these activities should be properly controlled, managed. For this, we require one central information processing organ, that is nothing but the brain. And you know, the brain is also a command and control system. It controls the voluntary movements, balance of the body, functioning of the vital organs like that of heart, kidneys, lungs, thermoregulation, hunger and thirst, biological rhythms or circadian rhythms of our body, activities of several endocrine glands, and also human behavior. All these are controlled by central nervous system. And brain is also the site for processing of vision, hearing, speech, memory, intelligence, emotions, and thoughts. All these are processed by our central nervous system, without which we cannot do our day-to-day activities. You may see so many things around you. You may hear the voices of different animals around you. But without the help of this brain, you cannot understand what you see. You cannot understand what you hear. Because whatever we see, whatever we hear, it has to get processed in our brain. And with our past experiences, we give meaning to what we see and what we hear. So, we are going to study about the details of this central nervous system in today's class. Our brain is well protected inside the skull, or what you call brain case or cranium. Inside the skull, the brain is covered by three important cranial meninges. You do come across meninges, they are the layers present around the brain. And these three meninges include the outermost layer called dura mater, a middle layer called arachnoid, and an inner layer called pia mater. There are three types of meninges: dura mater, arachnoid, and pia mater. And always you are asked which is the outermost, which is the middle one, and which is the inner one. Or you will be asked, which are these cranial meninges starting from outside to inside or from inside to outside? You must remember, these cranial meninges from outside to inside are the dura mater, arachnoid, and pia mater. Just beneath this arachnoid, there is a space, and this space is called subarachnoid space, and subarachnoid space is filled with a fluid called cerebrospinal fluid and contains blood vessels. It contains blood vessels, cerebrospinal fluid, and it contains blood vessels. Let us look into that. Look here. This is what you have, the outermost layer. Here, dura mater. Just beneath that, we have arachnoid matter. Just beneath that, we have pia mater. Dura mater, arachnoid matter, and pia mater. Or if you want to remember correctly, how to remember? Please remember pad. Pad, and always you must remember pad. P is the innermost, A is the middle one, and D is the outermost. Pia mater, arachnoid matter, and dura mater. And just beneath the arachnoid matter, we have subarachnoid space, and it is a highly vascular layer. The brain can be divided into three major parts. The first part of the brain is called forebrain. The middle one is called midbrain. And the last part is called hindbrain. The brain can be divided into three major parts: forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Look here. This is the forebrain. And this is the midbrain. And this is hindbrain. First part, mid part, and the last part in brain. This is what diagram you have in your NCERT book. Forebrain, then you have the midbrain, and this is hindbrain. As you can see here in the forebrain, you have the part cerebrum, and you have here thalamus and hypothalamus. All these are the parts of forebrain, and this is the midbrain. And hindbrain includes the pons, cerebellum, and medulla. Together form hindbrain. And hindbrain with the midbrain together form brainstem. Very important diagram. Generally asked for correct labeling. Now let us study these parts one by one. The forebrain consists of cerebrum, thalamus, and hypothalamus. I have already showed you cerebrum, thalamus, hypothalamus. All these together constitute the forebrain. Cerebrum forms the major part of the brain. Cerebrum. Therefore, the cerebrum is also called greater brain. Greater brain. It forms major part of the human brain. There is a deep cleft which divides the cerebrum longitudinally into two halves, which are termed as left and right cerebral hemisphere. In our cerebrum, we do have two halves. In between the two halves, or dividing the cerebrum into two halves, there is a deep cleft, and this deep cleft in middle divides the cerebrum into right and left halves. The right half of the cerebrum, or the right cerebral hemisphere, controls the parts that are present on the left side, and the left cerebrum controls the body parts that are present on the right side. The two cerebral hemispheres are connected by a tract of nerve fibers called corpus callosum. This is what corpus callosum we have. Corpus callosum is nothing but a tract of nerve fibers. Corpus callosum. Corpus callosum you find in between the cerebral hemispheres, which connects one cerebral hemisphere with another cerebral hemisphere, right with the left. You can see the corpus callosum here. This is what a deep cleft that you have, dividing the cerebrum into right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And these two hemispheres are connected with one another by means of corpus callosum, nervous tract. The layer of cells which cover the cerebral hemisphere is called cerebral cortex, outer one. The layer of cells which covers the cerebral hemisphere is called cerebral cortex and is thrown into prominent folds. You see the prominent folds here. This is what are the prominent folds on the surface of the cerebrum. The outermost part of the cerebrum is called cerebral cortex, and cerebral cortex is thrown into prominent folds, and these prominent folds are distinguished as sulci and gyri. You come across on this surface ridges and furrows. You have ridges and furrows on the surface of the cerebrum, also called sulci and gyri. And it is said that these folds accommodate more neurons, and that increases the surface area of our human brain. The cerebral cortex is referred to as gray matter due to its grayish appearance. Now the question arises why that cerebral cortex is grayish in appearance. Because if you see this cerebral cortex, outermost part of the cerebrum, the cell bodies of the neuron, cell bodies are others called cytons. The cell bodies of neurons with the nucleus granules are concentrated here, giving the color. As you already studied, in the cyton part, we come across plenty of nucleus granules. And because of these cytons are more in this cerebral cortex region, the cerebral cortex appears grayish in color. This is what you have, the gray matter in the cortex region. Outer part in the cortex region, gray matter, and on the inner side, you come across white matter. This is the case with regard to the human brain cerebrum or cerebral hemisphere. But please remember, when you look into the same in a spinal cord, it is vice versa. If you take this section of the spinal cord, in the spinal cord you see white matter on the outer side and gray matter on the inner side. Now the question arises why that it is white on the inner side. We know why it is gray on the outer side. It is because of the cytons of the neuron. And white inside, it is because of the axons of the neuron. And axons of the neuron generally have, axons of the neurons, generally they have the lipid sheath, myelin sheath. That is why it is white inside. The cerebral cortex contains motor areas, sensory areas, and large regions that are neither clearly sensory nor motor in function. We have in the cerebral cortex region motor areas, sensory areas, and large regions which are neither clearly sensory nor motor in function. Let us see that. These regions, called the association areas, are responsible for, that is, in between motor, apart from motor and sensory area, we do have large regions, large areas which are neither sensory nor motor in function, but these regions are called association areas. They are responsible for complex functions like intersensory associations, memory, and communication. Right? We are going to look into this in our next slide. Fibers of the tracts are covered with the myelin sheath. Fibers of the tracts are covered with the myelin sheath, which constitute the inner part of the cerebral hemisphere. In the inner part of the cerebral hemisphere, there are the axon part of the neurons. In the outer part of the cerebral hemisphere, we have cyton part of the neurons. So outer part, therefore, it is grayish in color, and inner part is whitish in appearance, and it is called white matter. Look here. This is what I wanted to tell you. If you look into our cerebral cortex, you can see a band to run from one side to another side, left to right, and you do have two bands. This is anterior part, this is what your cerebral hemisphere from anterior part, and this red band, whatever you see, that is concerned with the motor function, and the blue part, what you see, that is concerned with the sensory function. So here, motor areas and sensory areas. Whenever we see something, the stimulus ultimately reaches this particular sensory area. That means, if at all your toe, great toe in the feet is bit by a mosquito, you will get that information here, somewhere here. That particular stimulus has to reach here because your toe is bitten by the mosquito. Immediately, what to do? Whether to bend the body, take your hand and kill it, or just move your feet there, it gets decided in the association area, and from the association area, impulse goes there to this part. Impulse goes to this part, and it may just make you to shake these feet, or the impulse from here, this area, may go to the hand region. It may go to the hand and make the hand to move there in an attempt to kill it. So what I wanted to say, you have two areas. One is a sensory area, which receives the impulses from the sense organs, and then it's a motor area. Motor area gets the impulse or gets the regulatory impulse what to do, and accordingly that particular organ does the function. Right? Now, let us see, apart from this, whatever that is mentioned in the NCERT book, you must know, human brain consists of the following four lobes, important lobes: frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. Remember these four lobes in the human brain. I shall tell you later the functions of these four different lobes. If you look further, the cerebrum wraps around a structure called thalamus. You can see it. This is what the thalamus you have. Or thalamus is sandwiched inside the cerebrum. Cerebrum wraps around a structure called thalamus. And this thalamus is a major coordinating center. This thalamus is a major coordinating center for sensory and motor signaling. It is just like a post office. It receives the stimulus and sends the stimulus, regulatory impulse. It receives the impulse and sends the regulatory impulse to the concerned body part. So, cerebrum wraps around a structure called thalamus. Thalamus is a very, very important coordinating center, major coordinating center, concerned with the sensory and motor signaling. It is the part concerned with the reception of these sensory impulses and also response to these sensory impulses by sending regulatory impulses to the concerned body part. Another very important part that is present in the brain is called hypothalamus. And this hypothalamus is present at the base of the thalamus. The hypothalamus, hypo means below the thalamus. Hypothalamus contains number of centers which control body temperature, urge for eating and drinking. So this is another important part of the brain. Here we are going to study more about hypothalamus in the next chapter, chemical coordination and integration. And hypothalamus contains a number of centers which control body temperature, urge for eating and drinking. Apart from that, you also see that there are certain neurosecretory cells in the hypothalamus. And these neurosecretory cells secrete hormones called hypothalamic hormones. Hypothalamic hormones. And these hypothalamic hormones have control on the pituitary gland. So, this is about the thalamus and hypothalamus. Apart from this, you can see that the thalamus and hypothalamus here in this particular picture. Apart from this, the inner part of the cerebral hemisphere and a group of associated deep structures like amygdala, hippocampus form a complex structure called the limbic lobe or limbic system. Constituting the limbic system, we have the structures called amygdala and hippocampus. These amygdala and hippocampus together forming limbic system, along with the hypothalamus, are involved in the regulation of sexual behavior, expression of emotional reactions like excitement, pleasure, rage and fear and motivation. Therefore, in our brain, these parts, thalamus, hypothalamus, amygdala, hippocampus are very, very important in overall control of the functioning of the body, especially with regard to the sexual behaviors, expression of emotional reactions, excitement, pleasure, rage, fear, motivation, urge for eating, drinking, etc., etc. Now let us take up the midbrain. Midbrain is located between the thalamus and hypothalamus. You can see here, this is the midbrain. It is situated between the thalamus and hypothalamus on one hand of the forebrain and the pons of the hindbrain. This is what you have, the pons region. Pons region belongs to the hindbrain. Thalamus and hypothalamus belongs to the forebrain. So midbrain is located between the thalamus or hypothalamus of the forebrain and pons of the hindbrain. Another important point that you should know with regard to brain is, inside our brain, there are certain cavities. And these cavities which are present inside the brain are called brain cavities, or they are also called ventricles of the brain. They are called cavities of the brain or ventricles of the brain. Forming the cavity inside the cerebral hemisphere, you have first and second ventricle, and these first and second ventricles are together called lateral ventricles. So you have here one lateral ventricle and another lateral ventricle. These two ventricles are present inside the cerebral hemisphere. We have another ventricle, what is called a third ventricle. Third ventricle. Third ventricle is also called diocele. It is also called diocele. It is present inside the diencephalon. Therefore, it is called third ventricle, diocele. And this third ventricle is connected with another ventricle, the fourth ventricle. Fourth ventricle is present inside the medulla oblongata, and it is called metacele. Metacele. And the third ventricle is connected with the fourth ventricle by means of cerebral aqueduct. So, in your NCERT book, it is mentioned a canal called cerebral aqueduct passes through the midbrain. It passes through the midbrain and connects the third ventricle, other is called a diocele, with the fourth ventricle, also called metacele. So, the points that you have to remember, this is not given in NCERT. You must know that there are four ventricles inside the brain. They are nothing but cavities. First and second, which are together called the lateral ventricles inside the cerebral hemisphere. Third ventricle is present in the diencephalon, and it is also called a diocele. And the fourth ventricle is present inside the medulla oblongata. It is also called a metacele. And the third ventricle is connected with the fourth ventricle by means of the cerebral aqueduct. Now let us see a little bit more with regard to the midbrain. In the midbrain, there are four optic lobes. These four optic lobes, whatever you have here, you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4. These four optic lobes are otherwise called corpora quadrigemina. The dorsal portion of the midbrain consists mainly of four round swellings, and these four round swellings or lobes are called corpora quadrigemina. Of these four lobes, corpora quadrigemina is found in case of the birds also. Of these four round swellings or lobes, the uppermost two are called superior colliculi, and these superior colliculi or upper round lobes are concerned with the visual reflexes or sight. And the other two lobes, called inferior colliculi, are concerned with the auditory reflexes or hearing. So, upper two superior colliculi are concerned with the sight, and lower two lobes, called inferior colliculi, are concerned with the hearing. And these four lobes are found in the midbrain of the mammals as well as in case of the birds. You must also remember that in amphibians like frogs, we come across only two optic lobes. There are only two optic lobes, and these two optic lobes are called corpora bigemina. Bi means two. Bigemina. Right? You can see midbrain and hindbrain. This midbrain and the hindbrain, with these three parts, they together form what is called brain stem. Right? We shall see what is the function of the brain stem later. Let us take up now hindbrain. The hindbrain comprises pons. This is the pons. You have cerebellum. This is the cerebellum. Cerebellum. Right? This part is the cerebellum. And medulla. Medulla oblongata. The pons consists of fiber tracts that interconnect different regions of the brain. These fiber tracts that are present in the pons connect the forebrain with the medulla oblongata, or some of these fibers connect the pons with that of the cerebellum. Another important point you see here is that inside the cerebellum, this is the cerebellum. Cerebellum. The cerebellum, inside the cerebellum, you come across a tree-like appearance with the branches. A tree with the branches. This tree-like part with the branches is always called arbor vitae. Arbor vitae. It is found of white matter. Or putting it in another way, inside the cerebellum, the white matter is present in the form of a tree with the branches. And this white matter with the tree and branches, which looks like a tree and branches, is referred to as arbor vitae. The question likely to be asked is, the arbor vitae is seen in, or arbor vitae is present in cerebrum, cerebellum, optic lobes, medulla oblongata. You have to know that arbor vitae is present inside the cerebellum. Further, the cerebellum also has very convoluted surface, just like that of the cerebrum. You can see the convoluted surfaces here. In order to provide additional space for many more neurons, just like that of the cerebrum. Therefore, this cerebellum is also called lesser brain. We already seen cerebrum is called greater brain, and cerebellum is also called lesser brain. The medulla of the brain is connected to the spinal cord. This is the medulla oblongata. It is connected to the spinal cord. This is the spinal cord. Spinal cord. The medulla contains centers which control respiration, cardiovascular reflexes, and gastric secretion. So all these very, very vital functions of the body, respiration, circulation, and nutrition, these are very much controlled by the centers present in the medulla. One more point that is not mentioned in your NCERT book, but you are supposed to know, is that we have two areas, one called Broca's area and another one is called the Wernicke's area. Broca's area is present in the frontal lobe, Broca's area, and Wernicke's area is present in between that of the parietal and the temporal lobe. Wernicke's area. Broca's area is just concerned with the production of the sound or language. And Wernicke's area is concerned with that of understanding that language by giving meaning to that. Broca's area is only concerned with the production of the sound or uttering of the words. Interpreting that word is the work of the Wernicke's area. Now let us see some of the parts of the brain and their function. Look here. As I have already mentioned, In our cerebrum, we can make out 4 lobes: frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, temporal lobe. Each of these lobes is with a definite function to perform. Now let us go through these different lobes and find out what is the function in the healthy brain, what role is played by this particular lobe in the brain when it is fully functioning, and what function gets affected when the brain gets injured, that part of the brain gets injured. Let us see this. Look here. The frontal lobe in the healthy brain, that means in the perfectly normal functioning brain, frontal lobe is concerned with personality, emotions, intelligence, attention, concentration, judgment, body movement, problem solving, speech, just to speak and write. This is the role played by the frontal lobe. Suppose some injury takes place, this injury takes place to this frontal lobe. What will happen? In the injured brain, the brain which is injured in this particular part, in the injured brain, where injury has occurred to the frontal lobe, you see that loss of movement, that means the individual suffers from paralysis, repetition of a single thought, unable to focus on a task, mood swings, irritability, impulsiveness, changes in social behavior and personality, difficulty with the problem solving, difficulty with the language, can't get the words out, aphasia. This is what you come across with regard to the brain which is injured in the frontal lobe part. Parietal lobe. It is in the healthy brain. It is concerned with the sense of touch, pain, and temperature, distinguishing the size, shape, color, spatial perception, and visual perception. These are the functions of the parietal lobe in the healthy brain. If the parietal lobe is damaged or injured, then the person finds it difficult distinguishing left from right, lack of awareness or neglect of certain body parts, difficulties with the eye-hand coordination, problems with the reading, writing, naming, difficulty with the mathematics. And occipital lobe, if at all it is functioning properly, it is concerned with vision, and if this particular lobe is injured, this results in defects in vision or blind spots, blurred vision, visual illusions, hallucination, difficulty in reading and writing. Now let us look into the next one, that is the temporal lobe. Temporal lobe in the healthy brain is concerned with the speech, understanding language, because we know that in here we do come across Wernicke's area. Memory, hearing, sequencing, organization, all these are concerned with the temporal lobe. If this temporal lobe is injured, that results in difficulty understanding language and speaking, aphasia, difficulty recognizing faces, difficulty identifying or naming objects, problems with the short and long-term memory, changes in the sexual behavior, increased aggressive behavior. All these are seen if this temporal lobe is affected. Now, along with this, if at all you want to know what is the function of the cerebellum, cerebellum is mainly concerned with balance and coordination, and injury to the cerebellum makes it difficult coordinating fine movements, difficulty in walking, tremors will be there, dizziness, vertigo, and slurred speech. And brainstem, the midbrain along with the hindbrain, it forms brainstem. Brainstem is always concerned with the breathing, heart rate, alertness, and consciousness. And damage to the brainstem leads to changes in breathing, difficulty swallowing food and water, problems with the balance and movement, dizziness and nausea, vertigo. These are all the different functions of the different lobes of the cerebral hemisphere and the other parts of the brain. And this is not mentioned in NCERT, but it is better to know for the NEET exam. Now let us look into reflex action and reflex arc. You must have experienced a sudden withdrawal of your body part which comes in contact with objects that are extremely hot, cold, pointed, or animals that are scary or poisonous. If at all some iron box is kept, someone has ironed and left the iron box on a table. If you go to the table without your knowledge, if at all you touch that metallic part of the iron box, you get the feeling of the hot. So without our knowledge, sometimes we just touch some hot object and without our hand. Or whenever we are moving on the road, all of a sudden we may jump after seeing the snake, and after jumping, when you turn back and again you see, you find that it was not at all a snake and it is just a tire piece. Whatever action that you show without the involvement of especially the brain, and it's only with the involvement of the spinal cord, peripheral nerves, that is known as a reflex action. The entire process of response to a peripheral nervous stimulation, that occurs involuntarily, that is without conscious effort or thought, and requires the involvement of a part of the central nervous system, is called reflex action. Most of the time, the part of central nervous system is the spinal cord. Look here. This is a diagrammatic representation or diagrammatic presentation of a reflex action, showing the knee-jerk reflex. Here, even all someone pricks you in the thigh region, somewhat, or in the leg region, stimulus here. Okay, in the leg region. Without your knowledge, your leg will go up. It will move up. What happens at that time? The moment you are pricked or your leg is pricked in one particular point, immediately from this particular area, you have that receptors in the skin here. Immediately this stimulus by the pricking is taken by the afferent neurons. Impulses pass through afferent neurons. They reach the dorsal root ganglion, which is present on the dorsal side, or what you say posterior side of a human being. Then it goes to the spinal cord. Immediately it is conveyed to the area there, to the interneuron. Through the interneuron, what to be done? The regulatory impulse comes out and passes through efferent pathway. Efferent pathway is a sensory pathway. Efferent pathway is a motor pathway. Along with the motor pathway, the message regulatory impulse comes back to the thigh region, passes through the motor end plate, and then the message is passed through to the thigh region what to do. So here, the skin, whatever you have, that is the receptor. Stimulus is received with the receptor, passes along with the afferent pathway or sensory fibers, reaches the spinal cord, passes through interneuron, then comes to the motor neuron or efferent pathway and comes to the effector. The entire cycle is what is known as the reflex arc. The reflex pathway comprises at least one afferent neuron, sensory neuron, and one efferent neuron, motor neuron, effector neuron, appropriately arranged in a series. Right? The afferent neuron receives the signal from a sensory organ, here it's the skin, and transmits the impulse via a dorsal nerve root, afferent pathway, into the central nervous system at the level of spinal cord. The efferent neuron then carries the signals from central nervous system to the effector. Central nervous system to the effector. The stimulus and response thus forms a reflex arc as shown below in the knee-jerk reflex, or as shown above in the knee-jerk reflex. This is with regard to the reflex arc and reflex action, right? So, in today's class, we have studied about the central nervous system. We have seen the different parts of the central nervous system, a forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain, and we have also seen what all parts that come under the forebrain, what all parts are seen in the midbrain and hindbrain, and also we have looked into the lobes, frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital lobe and their function. And finally, we have seen that reflex arc and reflex action. So that's all for today's class.